Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship. Over to you, Minister.
Good morning. Bonjour. I'm joining you from the traditional territories of the Mississaugas of the Credit and the Haudenosaunee, along with my colleagues, Minister Garneau and Minister Gould. I want to begin by expressing our deepest sympathies to the families of the Afghan civilians and American service women and men whose lives were tragically taken in the explosions in Kabul yesterday. Make no mistake about it. This was a cold-hearted and calculated terrorist attack. It serves as the harshest of reminders that the situation on the ground is volatile in the extreme and could turn deadly at any moment. The members of our Canadian Armed Forces knew this full well when they were given orders to go back into Afghanistan to carry out a highly complicated and dangerous military evacuation. They're trained to remain focused and in control of their emotions on the battlefield because they know that clarity and purpose is the only way to complete their mission, one that is based on compassion, humanitarianism, and the moral obligation to do the right thing. Thanks to the bravery and outstanding performance of our armed forces, Canada was able to safely evacuate roughly 3,700 people and contribute to a coalition effort that has seen over 100,000 evacuated. It is the largest airlift in history. We owe them a debt of gratitude that we can never repay. This has been a time of enormous pain and anguish. Après que le Canada a annoncé qu'il cessait ses
After Canada announced that it would be ceasing its evacuation operations in Kabul, yesterday was an incredibly difficult day, both for people who wanted to leave Afghanistan and for their families and loved ones, and for everyone who has ties with this country.
First and foremost, our thoughts are with the people of Afghanistan, who only want the same opportunities that we enjoy as Canadians, to live in peace and security, to be able to raise their families, to watch them grow up, and share with them the prospect of a brighter and better future. It's also been a difficult time for our veterans, who sacrificed so much in the hopes that those opportunities would become realized. In my conversations with those that have served, I can tell how intensely engaged they've been in supporting our evacuation efforts. To our veterans, thank you for coming back into service. We will continue to work with you. And we will continue to work with the Afghan diaspora here in Canada. I know you are hurting. And my direct message to you is that we are going to continue to exhaust every effort to reunite you with your loved ones. Because even though the military evacuation may have ended, there is no end to our commitment to you, to your families, and to the people of Afghanistan. Let me tell you what we are doing right now. Bien que nous n'ayons pas
While we were not able to evacuate as many Afghans as we had hoped, it's important to mention where we are and what we have done. Thanks to the heroic efforts of the Canadian Armed Forces and our staff at Global Affairs Canada, we have been able to make progress.
Military evacuation operation successfully brought roughly 3,700 people to safety, the majority of whom are Afghan refugees and who are being resettled under our government-assisted refugee program. Many refugees have already arrived, and they are beginning to take root in their communities. More are currently in third country transit points, completing processing, and we look forward to welcoming them in the days to come. Second, even though our military have now concluded the evacuation, we are continuing to work tirelessly with our allies and our partners in the region to pursue every option to get the people that we need to get out of Afghanistan. And those efforts are yielding results. Yesterday, we secured approximately 500 seats on an American airlift, and they are now safely out of Kabul. We will continue to work with the United States and others to establish air bridges wherever we can, even beyond the anticipated withdrawal of the coalition on August 31st. Third, we are leading the world with a commitment to welcome thousands of Afghans who've been forced to flee their country. Canada was the first country in the world to launch this program, which will see us welcome a total of 20,000 Afghan refugees. And just today, the United Nations warned that 500,000 more Afghans could flee by the end of this year. Canada is ready to respond. We are in constant contact with our international partners, including the UNHCR and IOM, as we rapidly implement this humanitarian resettlement program, focusing on those who've had to flee Afghanistan and who are most at risk. Ce travail se concentrera sur les femmes.
This work will focus on human rights activists, women, religious and ethnic minorities, LGBTQ people, journalists, and others. We are also bringing together and reuniting the families of those who helped Canada, and we are focusing on processing family reunification applications for immediate family members of Canadian citizens, permanent residents, and protected persons. In this context, we will be working closely with neighboring countries and other countries in the region of Afghanistan in order to support host communities as part of our coordinated regional response.
Fourth, our special immigration measures remain in place to provide a pathway to protection for those Afghans who did so much for Canada. I want to be clear that their visas remain valid, even if they have not yet been able to leave the country. We've continued to process applications around the clock, faster than ever. We've also set up a hotline for support. Yesterday, our output was increased over 250%, with average wait times being only 2.5 minutes, and there were no dropped calls. Services are being offered in English and French and Dari and other languages as required. I'm also pleased to announce a temporary public policy to waive fees for immigration documents issued to Afghans or for extension of status, including those who wish to remain in Canada. As part of these three special measures, we will waive fees for Afghans with a valid confirmation of permanent residence who are outside of Canada but who can't get a passport or travel document, Afghans already in Canada who are seeking an extension or restoration of their temporary resident status, and Canadian citizens, permanent residents, and families in Afghanistan or in a third country en route to Canada. We've learned as we've come along, and we will continue to make the changes where we need to. We've mobilized our entire global network and operations center, and I want to thank sincerely the countless public servants who have been working tirelessly and around the clock to get the job done, especially those in my department. And fifth, we are mobilizing our settlement service providers, advocacy groups, and all of civil society to welcome the Afghan refugees who desperately need our help. I'm calling on business leaders, community leaders, faith leaders, and all Canadians to take up this cause. Call us. Call me. I need you. We need you. The people of Afghanistan need you. Open up your homes, your communities, and your hearts, and I promise these Afghan refugees will give back. We've seen that time and time again throughout our history, and even during the pandemic, and we will see it again now. Even though the coalition is withdrawing, Canada's commitment to the people of Afghanistan will endure. I want to conclude my remarks where I began, with just how hard and difficult this past period has been. They've been hard for Afghan Canadians, like my friend Minister Monsef, who are watching the events in their homeland with horror. Few nations have known the turmoil of Afghanistan, and few nations have such a big presence in the hearts of Canadians. Our solidarity with the Afghan people will never waver. These past days have been hard for veterans, all of them, who went and fought and bled for this cause. 40,000 Canadians went over. 158 did not come back. We owe it to them, to their families, to all veterans, and everyone who has contributed to a brighter future for the people of Afghanistan, to continue to fight for a better future for Afghanistan. Nous pouvons utiliser ce moment douloureux et le
We can take this painful moment and transform it into something positive. We can ensure that Canada will remain a peaceful haven for these refugees and welcome 20,000 of them safely.
Are already stepping up. Across the country, settlement organizations are ramping up their efforts. We're anticipating there could be some arrivals in the coming weeks, said David Yeo of the Catholic Social Services in Edmonton. And without even being asked, the United Church of Canada recently reported that more than 60 congregations want to sponsor Afghan refugees. Je remercie la communauté des services d'état.
I want to thank these community organizations, which play an essential role in integrating these refugees into their new lives in Canada.
Individual Canadians are rolling up their sleeves too. People like Sol Orwell, an entrepreneur in Toronto, who in just 5 days raised $350,000 in support of Afghan refugees. I'm an immigrant. I'm living the immigrant dream, said Sol. I know how much this opportunity matters. But it's not just about raising funds. We've set up a dedicated inbox that continues to hear from Canadians and all comers of our country. And for anyone wanting to reach out, it's Afghani resettlement at ccislive.ca. The messages are different, but the theme is always the same. How can we help? How can we create a brighter future? Having welcomed Syrian refugees 5 ago, Linda from Sarnia wrote this week to ask about hosting an Afghan family. I am 82 years old, widowed, and have a lovely home that I am willing to share, she said. Yannick from Burlington offered his furnished basement, complete with a full kitchen and an ensuite bathroom. Michael and Adrian, a couple from Shearwater, Nova Scotia, said that they have several rooms available for any Afghan refugee that needs it. And finally, Christina from Muskoka wrote to simply say, we offer our home to help with the refugee crisis. Our country is woven together with stories like these. We are on the cusp of a national moment. Canadians are opening their hearts and, as you can see, their homes as well. Les Canadiens sont un peuple.
Canadians are a compassionate people, and that compassion has never shone as much as it does in times of crisis.
Compassion is the heart of who we are, and I know that it will continue to shine brightly as we welcome the newest members of our Canadian family. Thank you. Merci.
Thank you, Minister. Merci, Monsieur le Ministre. On passera la parole maintenant à l'Honorable Marc Garneau, Ministre des Affaires étrangères. We're now passing over to the Honorable Marc Garneau, Minister of Foreign Affairs. Over to you, Minister.
Thank you all for joining us today for an update on the situation in Afghanistan. Yesterday, we saw horrific images of indiscriminate violence at the airport in Kabul. 90 people lost their lives in suicide bombings perpetrated by ISIS-K. This included many innocent Afghans, among them women and children hoping to leave, and 13 U.S. service members who made the ultimate sacrifice and gave their lives trying to help Afghans seeking freedom. To their families and friends, we offer our sincere condolences. As you know, we have worked nonstop to get as many Canadians, permanent residents, and vulnerable Afghans as possible out of Afghanistan while the air bridge at the Kabul airport was still open. As we said yesterday, we were able to get approximately 3,700 people out on flights, including about 2,000 Afghans. Unfortunately, the closure of the air bridge forced us to end our evacuation operations earlier than we would have wanted to. Despite our best efforts, there are many Canadians and vulnerable Afghans who supported Canada's efforts who remain in Afghanistan. This is heart-wrenching given the security situation on the ground. Let me be clear. We will not stop looking for other paths to bring these people home. Coordinating our efforts with our friends and partners enabled some to leave on Allied flights. At this time, our consular services continue to communicate with and support Canadian citizens and permanent residents who remain in Afghanistan. We will continue to have discussions with our partners and explore avenues for them to return to Canada. À ceux qui parviennent à quitter l'Afghanistan.
To those who manage to leave Afghanistan by other means, please know that we will be there for you. Our network of embassies and consulates is mobilized to help you. Ensuring the safety of our own citizens and vulnerable Afghans is a challenge being shared by many countries, and it requires significant international coordination. So I have been in contact with Secretary of State Blinken and my counterparts in Kuwait and Qatar. We are also working with our allies in the region, at the United Nations, in the G20 and the G7, in order to follow through on our commitment to the Afghan people, to help protect them, or rather to help protect the important gains that they have made, and to prevent the country from becoming a haven for terrorism again. To strengthen our commitment, I have appointed David Spruill as our new senior official for Afghanistan. David, a former ambassador to Afghanistan, is already in Doha, Qatar, to participate in critical discussions on Afghanistan's future and to help shape the international response to the current crisis. Any future government of Afghanistan must uphold the human rights of all its citizens, as required by international law, especially the rights of women and girls, and any viable government must be inclusive. At an emergency meeting of G7 leaders, attended by the Prime Minister earlier this week, leaders focused on ensuring the safety of vulnerable Afghans and foreign citizens, and on averting a humanitarian crisis. Our immediate priority will be to work with our allies to help our Canadian citizens, permanent residents, and vulnerable Afghans get out of Afghanistan. We will not stop until they are safe. Thank you. I'll now give the floor to my colleague, Minister Gould.
Merci, Monsieur Garneau.
Thank you, Minister Garneau.
Start by adding my sincerest condolences to the families and friends of all those innocent people who were killed and those who were injured in the horrific bombing at the Kabul airport. We are all deeply saddened by this brutal attack. We are all, of course, greatly concerned that humanitarian needs in Afghanistan will continue to increase in the coming weeks and months. Nous sommes tous, bien sûr, très préoccupés.
We are all, of course, greatly concerned that humanitarian needs in Afghanistan will continue to increase in the coming weeks and months.
Before recent events, we were concerned about the millions of people in Afghanistan already in need of humanitarian assistance because of conflict and displacement, but also because of deteriorating food security, droughts, floods, and the COVID-19 pandemic. Canadians have worked with Afghans for decades to support the health, human rights, and well-being of all Afghans. Thanks to this partnership, a generation of Afghans, including young women, have been given employment and education opportunities they otherwise might not have had. We hope those experiences will help Afghan society cope with so many of the challenges ahead. We have very experienced humanitarian partners who will remain on the ground to help deliver much-needed humanitarian assistance. Naturally, their current focus is on ensuring the safety and security of their own employees as they continue to carry out this important work. The $50 million in humanitarian assistance announced by Global Affairs Canada yesterday is in addition to $27.3 million that was already allocated for Afghanistan this year. Nous avons des partenaires humanitaires très
We have very experienced humanitarian partners who will remain on the ground to help deliver much-needed humanitarian assistance. Naturally, their current focus is on ensuring the safety and security of their own employees as they continue to carry out this important work.
50 millions.
The $50 million in humanitarian assistance announced yesterday by Global Affairs Canada is in addition to the $27.3 million that had already been allocated for Afghanistan this year.
There to help and support our experienced humanitarian partners to respond to the needs of those facing severe hardship identified in United Nations and Red Cross appeals both inside Afghanistan and in neighboring countries. These partners are well placed to ensure that this support reaches the most vulnerable with life-saving assistance such as food, clean water, shelter, and support for healthcare and sanitation. Our partners have extensive experience working in some of the most difficult trouble spots in the world, and we owe them our deepest thanks for undertaking this often very dangerous but always very necessary work. We remain deeply committed to ensuring the humanitarian needs of the crisis-affected populations are addressed. We will continue to work closely with all of our partners to explore ways that Canada can play a positive role in helping the people of Afghanistan during this very, very difficult time. Thank you. Merci.
Merci, Madame la Ministre. Thank you, Minister. On procédera maintenant aux périodes de questions. We will now go to the press conference portion of the event. As usual, one question, one follow-up. We'll kick things off on the phone. Operator?
Thank you. Please press star 1 at this time if you have a question. S'il vous plaît, appuyez sur étoile 1 maintenant pour poser une question. There will be a brief pause while participants register for questions. Il y aura un court délai vous permettant de vous enregistrer dans la file d'attente pour la période de questions. We thank you for your patience. Merci de votre patience. Our first question is from Mike Blanchfield from the Canadian Press. Please go ahead. À vous la parole.
Yes, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes. Go ahead.
Yes.
Right before I start, could I perhaps ask Minister Garneau just to repeat in English what David Spruill will be up to? And my question is for Minister Gould, or anybody else. You talked about all the women that in Afghanistan that Canada's helped and tried to elevate over the years. That whatever they've learned from us or whoever might help them now. But I mean, what more can you say, or what are your thoughts about these women right now? Because they're not on any priority lists for Canada. The country is filled with educated Afghan women who are in hiding, fearing for their lives, wondering what's next. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, perhaps, Mike, I can start off. David Spruill, as I said, is our special envoy for Afghanistan, and he is already in place in Doha, Qatar. His job will be to engage with many interlocutors. I'm talking about our allies. I'm talking about regional partners with respect to discussing how we will want to go forward with respect to Afghanistan. We feel it's important for him to be part of that and in order to represent Canada's point of view, and that is something that he's fully engaged on at this point in time.
And I can answer your question, Mike, just on women. I mean, I think we are all deeply concerned about the prospects for women in Afghanistan. It has been our top priority over the past 2 decades, advancing women's rights, providing education opportunities, and working on empowerment of women and girls. And of course, we are deeply, deeply disturbed and concerned by the fact that the Taliban is now back in control of Afghanistan and what that means for women. We have been very clear that women's rights is a red line for us, and it is something that I have spoken to all of our G7 counterparts on as well. We have been coordinating and communicating with our allies to transmit that message that women's rights must be upheld, and we need to continue to protect all women in Afghanistan. And just to maybe push back a little bit, women's rights activists are absolutely on a priority list for Canada, and we have been working to get them out, but also with our partners in the United States and other G7 countries to ensure that we're doing everything we can to get those women who are particularly vulnerable because of their activities, because of their positions, safely out of Afghanistan, and we will continue to do that.
And if I can just add a brief word to that, women and girls and other vulnerable populations are at the very heart of our strategy and our humanitarian resettlement effort. Canada was the first country in the world to set up a program that is specifically dedicated to and that does explicitly prioritize women and girls. And that is work that is going on right now. Among the very first Afghan refugees that landed on August the 4th was an expectant mother who has since had her child. That child is Canadian and now has a brighter future in Canada. And so too do the other families who we've welcomed since then, who are completing their quarantine, who are finding new homes, who are settling down and putting down roots in communities. And those families, of course, include women and girls. And as my colleagues, Ministers Gould and Garneau said, we will continue to place them at the very center of our humanitarian effort in the wake of this humanitarian crisis.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate that. And for my follow, just maybe you could add on what the message is to these women in hiding who may be wondering if the world still cares for them. And Minister Garneau, you mentioned you're exploring other paths to try to get people out. Can you amplify that, please?
So perhaps my colleagues want to handle the first part of your question. I'll jump in after.
Sure. So
go ahead, Karina. No, you go ahead.
Okay. No, I was just going to say that we remain in very close contact with many of the women who we have been working with in Afghanistan and partners here in Canada that are working very diligently to find safe ways for them to get out of the country. We continue to be engaged with them and are working with partners and allies right around the world, exploring really every option that we have and continuing to present a very strong front on behalf of the international community in that we expect and entreat that the Taliban protects these women and makes sure that their rights are respected, but also looking for every opportunity to get them safely out of the country. And I think that, you know, the SIMS program that we have and those 20,000 Afghan refugees that we will be welcoming here in Canada, I can assure you that women's rights activists are a top priority for us. And so we are working around the clock with partners both in Afghanistan, here in Canada, to do everything we can to get them to safety.
And just to build on that, thank you, Karina. We are, even right now, making sure that we work with women leaders who are driving the work here at home, women leaders who are driving the work abroad, who are working the phones around the clock to create those opportunities, those pathways to protection. Mm-hmm. As I said during my remarks, even though the coalition will withdraw, our commitment to the people of Afghanistan and the women and the girls and the vulnerable populations that we want to bring out will endure. And we are going to do everything that we can and exhaust every effort to bring them to Canada.
And perhaps I could just add on with respect to your question, Mike, with respect to the regional partners speaking. One of the considerations, for example, is some of the regional partners are speaking to the Taliban regime with respect to the possibility of returning Kabul airport, possibly at some time in the future, to more normal operations. This is something that may or may not happen, and nobody knows exactly when. But the arguments that are being presented is that is in the interests of the country to have the airport open because it's a landlocked country, and that this would be important, for example, for humanitarian aid and for allowing people to get in and out. So those are the kinds of examples of things that the partners and allies and regional partners are engaged with moving forward.
Thanks, Mike. On peut maintenant prochaine question. The next question, operator.
Thank you. Merci. Notre prochaine question est de Raymond Fillon.
The next question is from Raymond Fillon from TVA. Yes, a question for Mr. Garneau. How many people from the Canadian Embassy are still in Afghanistan? Because we've heard that a number of people were currently trying to leave the country. So can you confirm this? And what is the number? Answer. Thank you for the question, Raymond. There are no employees of the Canadian Embassy in Afghanistan at the moment. We have evacuated them, as you know. Until quite recently, there was a group of 8 military personnel who had remained behind to help on the ground, to help with the air bridge, but they have also left now. So there are no more Canadian employees or military personnel left. In terms of Canadian citizens and permanent residents, well, we don't have that number exactly, because not everyone registers when they go to a foreign country. Not everyone registers with Global Affairs Canada or with the embassy to inform Canada that they are in that country. I suspect that more people will register in the coming days, but I can say that there were also permanent residents and citizens who have left the country, who either escaped by land or who left by air previously to a different country. So we are in the process of determining how many citizens are in the country, because we want to be in constant communication with them. We want to be able to use every possible option to get them out of the country. Question. Some of these citizens say that they feel abandoned by Canada. So what would you say to them? Answer. We realized that we couldn't get everyone out. We were able to get out around 3,000 people. We did everything that we could to do that. But as I said, and as I would say to them, don't lose hope. We are going to continue to work on our objective, our main objective, until we are no longer able to get everyone out. We will continue to explore every possible option to help these people. So I would tell them, don't lose hope, we will be there for you.
Raymond, on procédera maintenant à la prochaine question. Now go to the next question, operator.
Thank you. Merci. Our next question is from Ashley Burke from CBC News. Please go ahead, à vous la parole.
Good morning. Minister Garneau, you spoke about, or it was spoken about, getting 500 people onto a U.S. plane yesterday and securing those seats. Are you expecting that there will be any more seats on flights before the 31st? And as well, if the Taliban allows the airport to reopen, would Canada send more military aircraft in to get people out, or would the work be getting people onto commercial planes out of the country?
So we were very appreciative of the fact that about 500 of our people, if I can put it that way, did get carried by the United States out of Kabul airport yesterday. Remembering, of course, that we have also brought people who were being sponsored, if you like, by other countries on our own Canadian Armed Forces plane. So it really has been a group effort to do this. At this point, as you know, in the operations that are in place at the moment in Kabul airport, the effort right now is to wrap things up and to bring out those who are still there, primarily Marines and British soldiers, to bring them out of the country and to close off operations. So the question arises, what happens with respect to the airport? Well, as I mentioned in one of my answers, that is something that certain regional partners are speaking to the Taliban regime about possibly doing at some future date. We don't know if we don't know whether that will happen or when it will happen, but the argument is being presented that it's in the advantage of the country to have an open airport because it's a landlocked country, and to bring in, for example, humanitarian aid or to bring in people and to allow people to leave. There are advantages, definite advantages in having that airport operational. We'll see in the days to come whether that comes to pass and whether it leads to commercial operations.
And can I just add very briefly to that, that we have remained in constant contact and highly coordinated with the United States as well as with our other allied partners on the ground. And that is one of the concrete reasons why we were able to secure additional evacuation capacity on that U.S. air flight. And of course, we will continue to press the case that we can get as many of our people out as we possibly can with the support and the assistance of our coalition partners who are there, especially the United States. We also want to reiterate our sympathies to the United States. They lost some very good people yesterday. It was a tough day. It was a tough day. And it just further underlines the risks that our own people take, our armed forces people took in carrying out this evacuation operation. And in a very short period of time, the number of people that they were able to guide and help get on flights and to get out it demanded bravery and courage. And again, we want to reiterate our gratitude to them. Going forward, as I said, we are going to work with all of our counterparts, all of the ministers who are here and others who are in constant contact with the United States to look for additional opportunities to get people out through the humanitarian resettlement programs that we've set up and through other collaborative efforts. So the cooperation remains very, very high, and it is yielding concrete results.
And Minister Mendicino, I understand the embassies around the world are on standby and working on this, but what support exactly are you going to provide to Afghans who are crossing land borders into other countries, whether it be food or money or, help with paperwork? And what exactly are you telling people? Are you telling them to go across certain borders and helping with that? As well, those visas, if they leave Afghanistan, are they still valid if they're in another country, the ones they've already been given?
Yeah, that's a really important question. And the short answer is yes. As I said during my remarks, if you have a visa in hand, but we're not able to get out yet, it's still valid. And we're going to do everything that we possibly can to make sure that it's honored, whether you're getting out by flight or by land out of Afghanistan or in third countries. And in cooperation with my colleagues who are at the table today, we are standing up an infrastructure internationally in the region to be sure that we are ready to receive those Afghans who are able to get out to third countries. This is big work. It's important work. And we are already on it. We are on it day and night. And we are working tirelessly to be sure that we can get as many Afghans out of Kabul as possible and then to third countries and then resettled here. And in the period of time within which we have set up this operation, we are seeing the concrete results, and we are seeing those results in the Afghan refugees who are now here, completing their quarantines, putting down roots in their communities, starting their new lives. That's the very essence, that's the very purpose as to why we had a moral obligation and continue to have a moral obligation to help the people of Afghanistan. And my point to you is that this obligation will endure. It will go on. Notwithstanding the departure of the coalition withdrawal, our obligation to the people of Afghanistan will endure, and we will see it through.
And let me chime in here to add on to that. As Minister Mendicino said, the visas will be valid, and we have already told all of our embassies and consulates in adjoining countries to be ready to receive vulnerable Afghans who will qualify under the special immigration measures. So we're all primed and prepped to receive them. Some have already left Afghanistan. We're aware of the situation, and we will be there to help them with their onward journey to Canada.
Thanks, Ashley. On procède maintenant à la prochaine question.
Thank you. Merci. Our next question is from Stephen Chase from the Globe and Mail. Please go ahead. À vous la parole.
Good morning. I'd like to just circle back to something that another colleague raised, and that is you've advised people to shelter in place right now. Are you would you advise them, or would you tell them to head to Pakistan? Are you telling them, or do you have any advice for people on the best way to get out? Otherwise, it sounds a bit like the scenario earlier, whereas you're willing to help them in other countries, but it's up to them to get to those countries. Are you giving them any advice about other means to get out or routes to take?
So I can have a stab at that. At the moment, we are, because we're in a period of final transition from phase one, we're asking people to stay in place at the moment to see how things evolve in the coming days. Some people may make the decision that they will seek to get to a third country. Many of the people on the ground there are best placed to make the decision about what their lowest risk safe route is, but we will be ready in all of the countries that they may possibly come to receive them at our consulates and embassies. So this is something that will occur in the coming weeks and months. But at the moment, we're asking people to stay put, because there's a lot of things that are going on at the moment, and we're going to keep in constant contact with them.
Thanks, Steve. I'll just add to that very briefly. It's an important question. I want to emphasize that we remain in constant contact with those Afghans who have applied and are eligible under our special immigration measures and other programs. We email and provide the best possible guidance that we can with regards to where to go, when to go. Security is a paramount concern. You saw how much is at stake yesterday, and the situation on the ground can change on a dime, and it can be deadly. And so we are working around the clock to make sure that we keep lines of communication open with those that we are trying to get out. And yes, we're going to continue to exhaust every option, whether it's by getting them out on coalition flights, whether it's by working with other regional partners to establish air bridges beyond the August 31st timeline within which the coalition will withdraw. And by, yes, looking at other ways to get them to third countries where we are already in action, mobilizing our own international footprint, but working with the UNHCR, the IOM, to receive those Afghans under our humanitarian resettlement program. And this is where we are showing leadership, Steve. Mm-hmm. We were the first country in the world to set up a program of this kind. And it's already in action. And as I've said, it is already showing results. We know there is a lot more work to do, but it's encouraging to see Canadians take up the cause to welcome Afghans as they arrive in Canada.
I have a follow-up question, but I would like to point out something before I ask my follow-up question. I haven't heard you give any numbers on how many Canadian citizens are left behind there, or how many permanent residents, or how many people with approved exit documents. And I would expect that would form part of a briefing. So I don't want to use my question on that, but I'm pointing that out. The question is about Pakistan. Pakistan's High Commissioner to Canada yesterday said that his government is willing to help Canada in any way it can to get people out. I'm wondering, I'd like you to address whether Pakistan could play a role in this. He mentioned the idea of a humanitarian corridor, but again, I'm hoping you can give us numbers as well on what's left.
So, as I said in a previous answer, at the moment we don't have those exact numbers because, as you know, when citizens go to another country, we encourage them to register with what's known as the Register of Canadians Abroad through Global Affairs or at the embassy. Not everybody does that, and hopefully those that are there who haven't done so will do so in the coming days online, obviously. And at the same time, there are some people who may have come into the country but have managed to get out on Allied flights, or who may have a little bit earlier on moved to another country. So we don't have the exact numbers at the moment, and that's what we're trying to nail down in the coming days. And we're encouraging people who may not have registered to let us know that they're there, because as soon as we have their coordinates, we will be in constant communication with them. And of course, Pakistan made that statement. That's very encouraging. And of course, we have consulates in Lahore, in Islamabad, and in Karachi, and we'll be waiting there for them. And we're hoping that those who do decide to go through Afghanistan, that they will be able to successfully cross and to come to our missions in that country.
Thanks, Steve. I'll now go to the next question. Operator.
Thank you. Our next question, notre prochaine question est de Annie Guillemette de
It's from Cogeco Nouvelles. Please go ahead. Thank you. Mr. Garneau, earlier you talked about Canadian employees of the Canadian Embassy. I'd like to know what's happening with the 15 or so Afghan employees who were taken aback when the embassy closed a few days ago. You talked about compassion and moral obligation. So how can you explain that these people were abandoned? They're saying that they have no recourse, so they're unable to get assistance. Answer. Thank you for the question. Based on the information that we have been provided with, people who were working there locally, who were working for the embassy, are on our list of people that we would like to evacuate. I can't tell you at this time if any of them did manage to be evacuated already. We also know that there were some former employees who were working at the embassy, and they are also part of our priority group. We would like to bring them back. I don't have the exact numbers, and I don't know if any of them wanted to or managed to escape from the country at this point. Question. Thank you very much. As a follow-up, you're telling people shelter in place. We'll try to help you in the next few days. We'll see if the airport will be functional once again and so on. But at the same time, we're talking about helping the people who have already gotten out. So what will happen to the people who still want to get out? Answer. Well, we're in what I hope is only a temporary period of great instability. You saw the explosions yesterday, and of course we're in the final phase of the evacuations from the Kabul airport. We hope that things will become clearer in the coming days. For the moment, we have suggested that people shelter in place in order to wait for the situation to clarify somewhat. For those who did manage to get out of the country, our priority is to get them out of this, whichever third country they're in, to Canada. And for those who are in Kuwait, we would bring them from Kuwait directly to Canada. So that's where we'll be working on the last leg of their journey.
Thank you. Merci. Our following question is from Tyler Dawson from the National Post. Please go ahead. À vous la parole.
Hi. My first question is about the people who were injured yesterday in Afghanistan during the bombing. Do we know if any of those people injured were Canadian nationals or people with visas in hand destined for Canada?
Based on the information we have at this point, the answer is no. But the final assessment, I don't think, is complete.
And a follow-up question. We've known for a year, give or take, that the United States is going to be pulling out final date announced in April by President Biden. I'm wondering if you can tell me when the government began developing the two programs that have been announced in the past few weeks, the special program for allies and interpreters and the 20,000 refugees. What's the timeline you guys were working on here, given what we knew about that this was coming?
Thanks for the question, Tyler. I can answer that. We started developing these programs this spring, and we put them into operation very quickly, as you've seen over the course of the last number of weeks. But I also just want to address the premise of your question. Canada has been a safe haven for Afghan refugees for years. 10 years ago, we stood up, the government of the day stood up, a special immigration measures program specifically designed to repatriate interpreters who had supported the Canadian mission. I would point out that the current special immigration program that we've introduced is substantially larger, more inclusive and compassionate, in particular by having a broader definition of those Afghans who supported the Canadian mission, not only during the military component of that mission, but equally after. And we have seen more than quadruple the number of Afghan nationals, I beg your pardon, resettled in a comparatively much shorter period of time. That's thanks to the members of the Canadian Armed Forces who were asked to and carried out a mission that was incredibly complex because it required them to reestablish Canada's presence in Afghanistan, in Kabul, at the Hamid Karzai International Airport, which is effectively a war zone. And by carrying out that mission with bravery and courage, and in an outstanding fashion, we were able to get out roughly 3,700 people who are now safe. But my point is that we have consistently been there for the people of Afghanistan to provide these humanitarian corridors. And in the wake of this humanitarian crisis, we were the first country in the world to set up a humanitarian resettlement program focusing on women, on girls, on religious minorities like Sikhs, like Hindus, like the Hazaras, all of whom understand what it means to be under the thumb of the Taliban. And we're going to continue to do everything we possibly can to get as many of them out. And I'm just encouraged by what I am seeing and hearing and feeling from Canadians, especially members of the Afghan diaspora here in Canada. Their leadership is remarkable. And those organizations are being led by women because they understand best what it means, what's at stake. And that is our focus.
Thanks, Tyler. And I'll go to the next question, operator.
Thank you. Our next question is from Jonathan Ling from Freelance. Please go ahead, à vous la parole.
Hey, good morning. I'm wondering if you can speak a bit about the decision to end evacuation flights out of the Kabul airport. The reports from AFP this morning suggest there's still 5,000 people at the airport itself waiting for evacuation. Obviously, we have many others who could be eligible to come to Canada who are in hiding nearby. Why are we relying on the Americans to evacuate those populations? There are 4 days left before the entire withdrawal from the airport is complete. Why have we stopped sending in strat lifts?
I could have a stab at that. As Minister Sajjan explained it, I thought very well. Evacuation is a very complex process, and the drawdown that follows that, which is having to be completed by the 31st of August, is also a very complex operation. As you know, there were some 6,000 Marines that were brought in by the Americans and close to 1,000 British Marines that were brought in by the British. And the Turks have also have military forces in place. There are an awful lot of pieces of equipment and logistics that are also at the airport. And essentially, the operational plan to achieve the objective of the 31st of August requires a very orderly sequence of drawing down by not only the United States, the final country to leave, but also by some 12 allied countries that also were part of that air bridge. And Canada was, as one of those partners, in the position that it was asked to do its drawdown so that it was completed yesterday. And that is part of that orderly sequence. And so that is why Canada had to terminate its last Canadian Armed Forces flight yesterday.
And Justin, if I could just add to what Minister Garneau said, in addition to the logistical support that we are providing our coalition partners in their withdrawal, Yesterday's explosions again underscores how volatile the situation is on the ground. And I think we are all relieved that thus far, and hopefully will continue, that the members of our armed forces are safe, that the people that they have helped us to bring out are safe, and that as we committed to, we stayed until the last possible moment within the context of a timeline that was decided by our coalition partners. But I again just want to stress that we are going to continue our obligation to support Afghans who are trying to get out, who are eligible under our programs, whether it's directly out of Kabul, if possible, or through third countries, as we have already explained. And that is the real point here, that this work is ongoing, that it's 24/7, that it's tireless, that it's not only an all-of-government approach, but that it's also going to take Canadian leadership. And that is what you are seeing day in and day out.
Minister Mendicino, I'm hoping to ask you, there are an untold number of Afghans still in the country who have ties to Canada, who may have family members here in Canada who are trying to sponsor them. But because of, Canadian bureaucracy or Canadian regulation, they have not yet qualified. They're too old to be considered a dependent. They can't be sponsored by somebody who has not obtained their PR here in Canada, for example. Looking back, do you have any regrets about those who did not manage to get their visas in time because of those, essentially that red tape? Do you have any regrets that those people couldn't get out in time before we left?
I want to be very clear, Justin, that everybody here and in government is focused on the here and now and what we can do for the people of Afghanistan going forward. We have been working around the clock to issue visas. My entire department has made this their number one priority. And as best as what we can tell, issuing visas is not the issue. The issue in getting out is the Taliban, is the violence, is the terrorism. And we are overcoming those obstacles as best as we possibly can. And not only with this military evacuation operation, but through our existing immigration programs, which we have made inclusive, particularly around the definition of family sponsorship, and not only in the context of the special immigration measures which are currently in place, but equally for protected persons who previously came to Canada, who sought refugee status, who got it before the Immigration Refugee Board. We're now prioritizing those cases. And by extension, once they receive protected status, we are able to prioritize their family sponsorship as well. So that's where our focus is. And we're going to continue to exhaust every effort to bring as many Afghan nationals who qualify under our programs, which again are groundbreaking around the world, to Canada. That is our singular focus.
Thanks, Justin. We'll now go to our final question. On procédera maintenant à notre question finale.
Thank you, merci. Our last question is from Christopher Nardi from the National Post. Please go ahead, à vous la parole.
Good morning. I have questions about one of the measures that's being announced this morning. So we'll be waiving from going forward all fees for Afghan or Canadian residents or people in Afghanistan with Canadian status. Why is that being done only now? This program was launched weeks ago, and presumably fees could have been an obstacle to people trying to come in. Why are we only doing that now when I figured there might have not been fees from the start, really?
Well, first, our number one priority was just to get visas in hand. And as I said, we have been issuing those visas at a clip. And by accounts on the ground, the being in possession of papers is not the challenge. The central challenge is the violence and how unpredictable and volatile the situation is on the ground. And today's announcement just is another demonstration of how we are trying to ensure that the process is as streamlined and as compassionate as possible. And this is something that our government has a track record for doing, particularly when it comes to standing up humanitarian resettlement programs. Through our government-assisted refugee program, we provide direct support for those who are eligible under our humanitarian pathways, refugees. And this is one of the ways in which we can get them here faster, one of the ways in which we can provide them the critical support that they need to become integrated and woven into their communities. And we will continue to, yes, adapt to the situation. If there are obstacles that we see in our way, we get rid of them, and we get rid of them quickly. And that's because we are focused on trying to help as many as we can.
People looking to come to Canada now to hide in a safe space. But considering, as you say, that extremely volatile situation in Kabul and across the country, what is a safe space? Can you tell me what the government is saying, recommending people hide? Are there places they should go? Are there particularly, what is a safe space in the current context?
Well, it's a good question, and what we do is we provide them the best possible advice about where to go and how to stay safe. Obviously, for operational security reasons, we won't disclose all of that information, and we want to be as responsible as we can be. But the point is that we keep those lines of communication open. We use email, we use phones, we have a hotline, we have a dedicated inbox. We've put additional resources. We've mobilized our entire global network to make this our number one priority, because we do see the volatility of the situation on the ground. It is a humanitarian crisis. And my point again, which I'll emphasize, is that these efforts are going to continue after the coalition withdraws, so that we can continue to support Afghan nationals, so that we can continue to support them in third countries, and so that we can welcome them here in Canada. And the outpouring of support that I think we're all experiencing, I genuinely believe will lead to another national moment where Canada can demonstrate leadership. And that is what you are seeing. That is what we are singularly focused on. And that is precisely what we're going to continue to do.
Thanks, Chris. Qui met fin à la conférence de presse. This concludes the press conference. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Thank you. Merci. The conference has now ended. Please disconnect your lines at the